Today we have Linda Bates, who is the Director of Development at Children at Risk. Welcome to our program, Linda.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah,
I'm excited to be here.
And we're excited to have you. And students are tweeting as we speak and sending in lots of good questions. So we'll get to some of those. You're at Children at Risk. Before that, you've been at Rice University and you were at Strake Jesuit beforehand. Let me ask you, Linda, how does someone choose to be in development? I mean, how did you decide that, hey, what I want to do is do fundraising?
Well, I started off early on in my college career thinking I really wanted to do politics. And then I got a little taste of that and decided, no, I don't want to do politics, but I still really want to make a difference. And I really like the aspect of being able to sell people on what I believe in and having a cause that I really am a firm believer in. And so I just came upon development in that way, trying to find something that I could really be a great salesperson for and a cause that I really believe in and really make a difference. And so that's how I really started off in development.
And so many people find development like scary, or they think, oh, it's like I'm trying to ask people for money. But you love development. And I think most people, we're going to find throughout the semester, most people who are successful at fundraising love the idea of doing fundraising. Tell us about why you love it.
Well, I think two big things that, first of all, I think because you really should be focusing on the relationship building. I love that concept that you're doing relationship building. And the other thing is, I think so many people go into fundraising thinking that it's about trying to get people to give you money. And you're scared of that and you're having to ask for money. But the truth is you're really trying to have them invest in something you really believe in. And you're giving them the opportunity to invest in that. And it's something that really is deserving of their investment.
One of the things that I often, when people are talking about development, and I'll talk about development and I'll say it really is what you just said, relationship building. So it's not going out and asking for money. It's going out and making friends for the organization you're working for.
Definitely.
How do you develop relationships with people that might be potential donors?
Well, I think the first thing to do, I mean, we have a really great opportunity in our organization because we do a lot of educational events. So that's a really great first step, that you're getting people in, they're learning about the organization, and then you follow up and you just talk to them more in depth about what we have going on, and then continuing that education of them over time and cultivating that relationship. And it's easy. You end up finding that you have a lot in common with people on a personal level, and then they obviously have the same interests as you and your organization, or they wouldn't be continuing to meet with you.
If you were writing a book, Linda, about development and how to be successful in development, what sort of chapters might they look like? What chapters would you have? That's a tough question, I know. But.
It is, but I think it would be kind of a dummy's guide, to develop. So really easy for other people to do, because I think sometimes it's scary for people, like you're saying, and then it can be kind of academic, the literature. So I would really want something that's easy to read and short and to the point. And so covering things like how to get people the intro to get them in there. So maybe having educational events or special events that raise money, and the various other aspects of grant writing and how important that becomes, and what's the difference between doing corporate funding and individual raising of funds.
So you would break it down into those different types of fundraising. Let's talk a little bit, and because I know as we go through the semester we'll talk more in depth probably about some of these things here, but when we break down fundraising into sort of the different types, the most common type that everyone's familiar with is being in church and a basket gets passed around and putting money. That's a basic type of fundraising. But if you're looking at some of the more successful fundraising organizations in town, how do they get the bulk of their money?
Individual giving. They get it from major donors that they've cultivated over time and that give them major gifts. And very importantly, for a lot of small organizations starting out, they get smaller gifts from a lot of people, and then they cultivate that over time, and they're really devoted to seeing that donor that's a smaller donor and making them feel invested in the organization, feel important, and making sure that they feel like their dollar is really going a long way. And then eventually the donor gives more and more of their dollar back to you. And
so individual giving.
I think individual giving is the biggest one because it's the most stable. And if you look at like Giving USA and those types of things, that 75% of donations come from individual giving overall, if you look at the statistics.
And a lot of that individual giving, when it's in small amounts, you can see at churches or giving to your school or alumni drives.
Yeah, and a big thing now is, like Susan G. Komen, like their races and walks are really big. So people are, getting people to give to them personally to walk or do the MS 150, and you sponsor somebody. So they're getting a lot of money that way too. And those small donations, you get them kind of in and then they keep sending you stuff and you keep getting things. So.
Susan B. Komen sort of brings up the idea of special events.
Yeah.
So a lot of people think to raise money you have to have a big gala. Talk about special events and how important or not important they are.
I think special events are really important to an organization depending on the size, how much capacity you have to do an event. And they're really important to get your name out there. So it brings in new people and fresh people into your organization, fresh donors. And it's important to just not just bring them in and let them learn about the organization, but you really have to do the due diligence and follow up with them afterwards. And so, I think it can do a lot for your organization, but it's really important. Each organization has its own culture, so what fits right. So it may not fit to have a gala. It may fit to have a walk or a run or to have a luncheon. So just really knowing what your organization is like and what fits the culture and what will be successful for your organization.
And the other thing that I found with special events is it depends upon the town you're in. So we have an office in Dallas, and some things that work very well in Houston don't necessarily work in Dallas. And we find the same with Washington, D.C. or New York City.
Yeah.
There are different ways to do special events. Can you talk, Linda, specifically about Children at Risk's special events?
Yeah, so we do really 3 major special events. We do a gala that's fantastic. We bring in an entertainer, a really big name entertainer. So it brings in other people that you wouldn't normally come to our educational events.
So we had Jay Leno a couple of years ago.
Yes, we did Jay Leno, Randy Travis, really big names. This year we're having Kool and the Gang as a celebration for our 25th anniversary. Cool. Yes. We do a golf tournament, which I think really speaks to a corporate clientele because you can have people always take their clients to golf as a way to just kind of service their own clients. So that's a way that they can be giving back to charity, but also getting it out of a corporate dollar instead of out of a different bank account within the organization. And then we have a luncheon that really brings in the business community as well, and then academic side as well. So it's during the day, and we're honoring people that have done a lot of great work for us in different issue areas. So really great.
And when you look at special events, because a special event, if you're brand new to fundraising, it seems like something, well, we could do a special event. But historically, when organizations do special events, the first time you do a special event, most organizations really don't make much money, right? It's usually something that builds over time.
It does build over time because you have to build up your base of people that are going to be able to come to it. And so you have to kind of start out knowing you may make your first year maybe $25,000 and $50,000. And you slowly grow it over time. So yeah.
So individual giving, special events. What's another big way that people raise money?
Foundation giving. So
Talk about that.
So a lot of foundations in town will, or anywhere you can do national foundations, but to be able to do grant writing for different programming pieces that you're doing, or if you're having a capital campaign, a lot of foundations really like to fund for that. So really investing the time and doing grant writing, sending those into those foundations, getting to know the program coordinator, the grant administrator at the foundation really helps. And then they do a lot of funding in town. So especially some like Houston Endowment or Brown Foundation.
So those are examples, Houston Endowment and Brown Foundation. Yeah. And let's use Houston Endowment as an example. How does someone write a grant, and how does it happen, and how much money is it?
Yeah. Well, everybody has their own style of grant writing. And grants from different foundations can be different, but Houston Endowment is a bigger one, so they generally give out bigger grants, $25,000 to $1 million grants and multi-million-dollar grants. And I think it's very important, again, to relationship build with the grant coordinator there, whomever fits in your area, or the executive director if it's a small foundation. And we see a lot of foundations really want to only fund programming pieces. They're not doing unrestricted funding, or operational funding. So you really have to be considerate and think about fully thought out programming of what that would mean, and budgeting for that, and do forward thinking as your group to apply for that. Yeah.
And can anyone off the street, if I just started a nonprofit and I got my 501c3 status, could I just write to the Houston Endowment and ask for money?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can. Anybody can. And well, not every foundation is that way. So some, like Simmons Foundation, you kind of go through an orientation process where they tell you a little bit about what they want. But as long as you fit in there, you can write it. Doesn't mean you're going to get it, but you can spend the time to write it. But
what is when you decide and you look at foundations, what is the percentage? If you're applying to 100 foundations, how many do you think will end up giving you money? In general, for most nonprofit groups?
It just depends on it depends on the relationship. If you have a really good relationship, and if you're just doing a lot of foundation writing to get some, I would say maybe a third.
A third,
yeah.
So you have to do a lot of writing to get some.
Especially as you build up.
And I can't just pick 100 out of a foundation directory and write to them. I'm going to get a third if I develop those relationships.
Yeah.
And if I know people and I have a great idea.
Yeah. Well, because foundations, their money is dependent on the market, or they have to receive money too, and you can't depend on getting the same money from a foundation year to year. So it could change. It's not stable money to budget on. You really have to be thoughtful of that what are we going to do next year to get this funding, and will they even come in at the same level that they did this past year?
Yeah.
So.
How about corporate giving? I mean, people often think about, how do I get money from Exxon? How do I get money from Shell? How does that work?
It's easier if you know somebody. So if you have somebody on your board, or you know somebody that's got an in with the community person, or that works there that's high up in the corporation, that makes it really easy. If your organization is partnering with organizations that have been receiving funding, then that's a really great way to go to them and say, well, we're partnering with this organization. You fund them. Would you, meet with us and let us talk about what we're doing, and then you talk to us about what your funding priorities are, and let's see if we can fit. But there are so many organizations in town, they won't really meet with everybody, so it helps to know somebody.
Yeah.
It's all about who you know.
Very good. Let me, we had some great questions that were submitted here, Linda, and I want to go ahead and ask a couple of these. Marta Alvarenga, who's a great questioner, wanted to know, what would be the 5 most important tips that you would give a small nonprofit that's in the early stages of fundraising? So a brand new nonprofit, and you're going to give them 5 tips. Do you have 5 tips for a nonprofit?
Tips. I would say really focus on donor-centered fundraising. So
what do you mean by that?
So what I mean by that is that you treat that $100 gift like it's the only gift you have. If you have the capacity to do it, really, really go after and try to bring those, all the gifts that you get, try to turn them over into to bigger gifts, and really make it more about the donor. What is it they're looking for? And less about the organization in some way. So you're really focusing it more on
You're
them.
thanking them.
Thanking them all the time. You're trying to sending them information, newsletters, handwritten notes, meeting with them for coffee, bringing them to, inviting them to things. And then if you have them at an educational event or something, making them feel like a VIP. Always making them feel good about their donation.
Some groups do a good job with that. Others don't do as well a job with that. It's called stewardship, I guess, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Tip number 2.
Tip number 2. Get your board involved. I think that's the biggest thing. If you don't have an involved board, then you're going to be lost. Tip number 3, make sure that your executive director is chief fundraiser, is what I would say. They have to be the fundraiser for your organization. They're going to, and if they can't do it, then do some really good training of your executive director.
That's what you had to do with me. Train me
yes,
to be very good.
You're always doing that, right? Tip number 4, I would say really probably prioritizing, your donors too. So if you have somebody that has been donating for many years, or if you've been open for 5 years and they've been donating for the 5 years, like even if it's only a $50 gift, really prioritize that and make sure that you're really focusing on that. So segmenting your population a bit. And one more, 5.
I could give. I think sometimes the idea of having a big vision, or having an idea that people can grasp onto. So these are the possibilities, and let people sort of dream with you and understand the possibilities. And then as the organization grows, whenever there are successes, making sure that you talk about the possibilities and how we're getting there, because these were the things that we've done. So
on that note, I would say I think donors love to have the opportunity to give their input on something. So if you're in a startup organization, you're even looking for, well, this is kind of what we're looking to do in fundraising. What are your thoughts on that? They love to give their input. It's a way to get them bought in, and then you can go back to them and say, well, this is what we're doing. How about you come on board now that you've been helping us? You know, the more you have them involved, the more they're likely. But the other thing is you really do have to ask. I think that's oftentimes the one piece that you forget. If a donor's never asked, they're never going to give.
Yeah, that's a good point. Amy Cole Guzman wants to know, is there one program in your organization, Children at Risk, that's pretty difficult to fund?
Yes, so one of the issue areas that we deal with is juvenile justice. And I think that it's difficult to fund, and we talk about it internally. It's that people really don't want to give money to what they consider quote unquote bad kids.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to fund for that.
Conversely, what's the easiest area
Education,
to fund?
I think.
People
Everybody,
care about
it's a hot topic.
Everyone has one, mostly.
Right, it could affect everybody. You know, I think even people that don't have children realize that an education affects their workplace and will affect the workplace as we move forward. So.
Very good.
Yeah.
Monica Sines wants to know, how do you see your position relative towards board development or engaging for fundraising aspects? I mean, how important are board development and engagement?
Oh, I think it's crucial. I was just at a talk yesterday about board engagement and how crucial it is to fundraising. I mean, if your board's not engaged, then they're not going to be willing to fundraise for you. They're not going to be willing to make the connections for you. And depending on the organization, if you're a direct service or you have a lot of volunteers, then it may be a little easier to do it without your board. But if they're not involved, it's going to be tough.
Yeah. So that's an important thing for you, is getting that board going. Monica also asked this question, which I think is nice, is what was one of your most important development goals, most challenging development goals that you've encountered at your jobs that you've done? What has been pretty challenging for you?
I don't know if it wasn't really a goal. I think so I have worked in the past with so this is a volunteer thing. So volunteers, I think, can sometimes be fantastic, and you can't do it without them. But there are those challenges to having those really dedicated volunteers that may not have don't want to always work in the parameters that you're given. So that's always a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
But they have this great vision, and without them, you can't do it.
That happens a lot, doesn't it?
It does happen
from time to time.
You're like managing the volunteers too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Richard Kendall wants to know, are there any specific experiences that you've had that have shaped how you go about development today?
Oh, I think so, and I think everybody's different. I think whoever your mentor is and how they do it, or what you've seen as successful. So, I think if somebody comes from a background from a really large organization like a university, then they're shaped in having really set. I only do these types of fundraising and that type of thing. So I only really want to do individual. I can't deal with like grant writing or events and those types of things, and they've never done that. I think you come from a mid-size or a smaller organization, you're used to doing everything. And so that really shapes what you're interested in, what you're doing.
That's
and I think,
interesting.
yeah, because if you work at Rice in the development office and you only do annual fund, well, that's all you do. You've never dealt with events. You don't know anything about it, and you're not interested in it.
So then tell me specifically, a place like for you working at Strake Jesuit, which has a very dynamic fundraising, it's a very dynamic fundraising organization. How did that specifically impact you, Linda?
I just think it makes it, I think especially with Strake, I think everybody was giving for the most part. So it makes you really you can get everybody to do it. You can get people on board to give. And even people that don't have maybe the financial capacity, you can still, if you have the right mission, get them on to be even giving as a participant in some way. Find what it is they're interested in, what they will give to. And so just reiterating that it's not impossible to really get people on board. And
did you learn a lot there?
I learned a ton, of course.
And tell us about when you started and sort of what was striking to you and what was fun and what was like, wow, this is a surprise.
I think one of the biggest surprises I had working there was like how they, were constantly in campaign mode. And so they're doing capital campaigns all the time, raising, $30 million. and yet they're also maintaining this constant flow of annual fund and their regular donations. So, how do you get somebody to give over and above their annual giving? And so how strong, I think it's really great to see how strong is your annual program to where individuals are constantly giving, and yet you can go out and after them and say, but we'd also like you to give over and above that to this capital campaign. And then our capital campaign's over, we're successful, okay, let's now move on to starting another one. What can we do now? So,
how would you compare the three organizations that you've worked at, that you've done fundraising? So Strake Jesuit, Rice University, the Kinder Institute specifically, and then Children at Risk.
Well, I think at any school, so a private school, you already have a group of people that are already ready to give money to you. They're giving money as part of their tuition, and then they're ready to just donate because they're really, they can see the product every day of what's happening, so they will give you the funds. So you're really doing individual giving, but of course we did foundations and events. Everybody loves to do an event around a school. And at the Kinder Institute, because all of the research was really geared towards helping out the business community, it was so much giving from the corporate world. And then at Children at Risk, we have various. So we have, since we do research, a lot of foundations give us funding, and we do advocacy. Then we have still a lot of foundations. We do a lot of our funding based on our events to get people really kind of in the door with us. So.
And a school, a university, a nonprofit organization. These are all nonprofits.
Yes.
They're all charitable nonprofits. And a hospital would be another one. These are all nonprofits. And do people that are giving money, do they assume they're all the same, or do they think differently? So would a foundation or a big individual donor, would they treat these charitable nonprofits differently?
I have experienced that they treat them differently. There's a different expectation from large organizations. They run like a business, so they expect a different level of like a grant proposal per se. And then smaller organizations, there's just a different level of what there's an expectation there. And I think people really are in tune to that. Corporate community affairs people and foundations, I think they really know the difference, and they really do treat people differently and in a good way. Talk
about what the personnel looked like at the different places that you've worked and at different places around town. What did the staffing look like at a Strake Jesuit, Children at Risk, other nonprofits? Numbers?
In the development office?
Yeah, the development office, yeah.
I think in the development office at Strake, you have people that...
How many people do you have? Probably about
8 to 10.
Yeah.
And you have you have a director of development and associate director of development, somebody that does your alumni relations, an annual fund person, an event person, a communications person. So you have somebody doing all these things, and then you have a support person. And they vary. So some people are alumni, and so they may not have come in with experience, but a lot of people do come in with experience. I think at smaller organizations, you definitely have probably maybe a handful, maybe one person on staff. You see that a lot.
A lot of organizations just have one development person, right?
Yeah, if they have a development person. Right. So if it's a really small organization, they just have the executive director doing everything. But in a small organization, it's usually maybe one person, if not maybe a couple. And if it's one person, they probably have a background in development. If not, then it's probably really inexperienced people because they don't maybe have the budget to pay people. And then at large organizations, at Rice, there were over 150 development people.
Wow.
Yeah.
All raising money for
the university. And very competitive with one another.
Yeah.
And career development people.
Yeah. It's interesting, and you compare a place like UH Downtown to Rice, more students at UH Downtown, yet there's just a handful of people in development. Right. Yet at Rice you have 150 people.
Yeah. Well, private university.
I once had a guy who was running a child advocacy group in Virginia, and he said, well, you need to have the people to ask for money if you're going to get money. So you need to have that,
And they have a lot of feet on the ground at Rice. So they have somebody that does the northeast side for social sciences, but they also have it for every college has their own person that does, funding for every area.
And you were specific to the Kinder Institute.
And I was only for the Kinder Institute, yes.
Yeah, very good. Denise has a couple of questions here. Well, one of Denise's questions is, what are your major sources of fundraising, and what's the organization's breakdown of these? So for Children at Risk, what are the major sources of fundraising, and what's that percentage breakdown roughly?
Our major source of fundraising is foundations, and that has a lot to do with the fact that our programs do a lot of research. We're research-based. And so I would say about 47 to 50% is from foundations, about 25% is from special events because we do 3 major special events, and then the other portion would be from individual giving and then corporate giving.
Okay, very good. Sharhanda has a great question. How many special events fundraisers do you suggest a small organization have per year? I know how you're going to answer this one.
1.
Fun, yeah.
Yeah.
You think 1 is really good for an organization, just to have 1 and focus?
It's the standard, I would say, for the, that's what research shows, I guess, in the field, is that 1 is good.
Is the best way to go.
Yeah.
And Amy Rogers asks, how do you avoid spending more than you'll make on a special event?
Budgeting. Yeah. And getting a lot of in-kind donations. I mean, just watching your budget. You really have to make sure that you, and having a really great, and this is probably getting a little too nitty-gritty, but having a really great gift planning chart of what you need to get to where you, the goal that you want to get to. So making sure you have enough $10,000 gifts to make and how many $5,000 gifts do you need to make sure you're getting to $100,000 if you need to make sure you're making a profit.
That's an important point, right? I mean, in terms of being a director of development, you're not just going out and trying to raise money. There's a lot of detail in terms of budgeting and strategic planning. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I guess I was giving a little bit of that in the description of like a gift chart. So for our event, for like a gala, if you need to raise $400,000, knowing you're going to spend $150,000, you know, and to make whatever you want to make, and so you really have to break down how many tables do I need at 10,000 to get there, how many do I need at 5,000, and then you need to go out and really pursue those. Like I know I need to be pursuing these, and then how many tickets can I get off of that, and then, you know, really having a smart analysis of what you want to do. And another good thing, you know, with development, when you're talking about strategic, is really segmenting your population. So if you know somebody, if you have different areas of interest in your organization like we do, if they're really interested in human trafficking, always, you know, giving them information on human trafficking, and trying to segment that population out.
Sharhanda refers to this in terms of working with the executive director, how closely you work with the executive director. There are sometimes in organizations when, and you and I have both seen this, where the staff says, oh, the development, they'll raise the money, we have other stuff to do. How effective are those groups when they're not sort of working together?
It depends on the nature of the organization. I think that there is definitely a stigma about development in organizations. It's sort of like, yeah, you're raising the money, but we're doing the real work. You know what I mean? And so they sort of do differentiate themselves. That's not true, you know, at Children at Risk. We definitely work really hand in hand. You can be effective in some places. I think in a place such as Children at Risk, if you have a lot of research-based, programmatic things going on, and you're trying to raise money on it, and you don't have program people involved, it's not going to make any sense because development people aren't doing the program. So there's a disconnect.
So how closely do you recommend working with the executive director? I know that's very difficult in your case, but how does that work?
Well, I think that it's going to be successful if you work really closely together because, as I said earlier, I think you should be the chief fundraiser for the organization, and that should be really a major piece of what the executive director is doing, is fundraising.
Samantha Coates wants to know, what's the most difficult lesson that you learned when first becoming involved in fundraising?
I think the most difficult lesson that I learned would be that it's not something that happens overnight. You know, relationship building is a long process. And so especially if you're responding, or you're having to answer to people about a dollar amount in a budget, and you're trying to build relationships, that's not a quick answer. So that's a hard thing to learn, that it's not something I'm just going to go out and make the ask and it's going to happen. It really is a time thing. When
you're telling the story of Children at Risk, you know, your elevator speech, or someone says, tell me about Children at Risk, tell us how you answer that. I mean, what is Children at Risk all about for you?
I feel like Children at Risk is a wonderful organization, and we do advocacy and research for various children's.
You feel like you're
I feel like
under
I'm
pressure.
I'm very under pressure now.
Yeah.
But I just feel like if you are working for an organization, you have an elevator pitch. But I think that you should have one. But I think everybody should be personal to them. And so I know that for me, we definitely have to cover all of the different topics. I'm really a big proponent of our education piece, so I feel like it's easy for me to talk about the education and how much work we're doing with that. But we've done so much work. So I think that we have a lot of organizations out there that are really grassroots organizations, and they do a lot of direct service, but we're really making large change at the legislative level. And I think that it's really amazing to me to look back and see all the things that we've done historically with such a little amount of money, and the huge return on investment that donors get and what we're doing and how much change that we're really affecting.
Martha has another question. What would you consider to be the strongest part of your presentation pitch that makes fundraising efforts successful? What's the best thing that you could bring to the table when you're making that pitch?
I don't think it's about your pitch.
Oh, good. Tell us.
I mean,
why
I don't.
Is that?
Because I mean, I just really don't. I don't think it's about your pitch. It should be about your relationship with them, and what's the organization have to bring. So I can say that we're a research organization and we do advocacy, but what do people really want to know? They want to know, what have we done to make a difference, and why should they invest in us? And that's really about. That's going to take a lot longer than a pitch that I can give. So I think it's important to highlight, what are we doing moving forward? What are some things that we're really successful at? And that type of thing. So
it's interesting. I want to use an example for this, because last night you and we had drinks with a significant donor for Children at Risk, right? Now, who's given much, loves Children at Risk, and we were specifically going to ask how much he was going to give this year, right? And how long did we spend? Maybe an hour and a half with him.
Yeah.
And I would say probably an hour and 15 minutes of that conversation was all about just talking to him, not about how much money he's going to give, but just how his wife was doing, how his kids were doing, talking about our stories. It was all about relationship building.
Yeah.
And I think that's important for people to understand, that you can be with a big donor who gave close to $100,000 and is responsible for much more than that in the past, and you spend your time just sort of being friends, being a very good friend with them.
Right. I mean, I've never had a meeting with somebody about an organization where it wasn't that way.
Yeah.
I've met, meeting with corporate, a representative from, AT&T. We're talking about their interest in general, and why do they like education, or what is their, how does that affect their children, and that type of thing. They know why they're there for the meeting. You will get to that place where you can have a conversation and say, you've been a really big supporter of us, or you really have an interest in what we're doing. We'd really love for you to come in at, $25,000 this year. And you can get to that place, but you can't get there, right off the bat. So you have to massage it a bit. Yeah.
What are the biggest mistakes nonprofits make around development, Linda?
I think different nonprofits make different mistakes. So I would say one that you see a lot of is only caring about the big donor. So you only massage a major gift donor. And then you have this donor that's been giving you $200 or $500 for 10 years, and you never do anything for them, and they have the capacity to give you a lot more, and just not doing anything about it. And because all you care about is dealing with your $100,000 gift. And so really paying attention to that. So do we have really loyal donors and we're not doing anything for them? Is there something we could do for them? I think that's a missed opportunity often.
Any other big mistakes?
Well, I think that if you're an organization that has a lot of events and you're not following up with your donors, or new
that's
people,
stewardship that we talked about.
I think that's a problem.
Yeah, that's problematic.
Yeah.
Which organization is the best fundraising organization in Houston?
Well, I mean, by numbers, you could say something like the Children's Museum. They do a great job. But I think one of the most interesting organizations that I think does a really great job, that's kind of new-ish in town, is Cristo Rey. And I think it's interesting to me because it's such an interesting model that's big on this new philanthropy that's going on.
This is the Cristo Rey High School.
Cristo Rey Jesuit in town. So they have this model where their students work for corporations to pay part of their tuition. So you have this already built-in base of people that are going to donate to you. all these corporations are then going to turn around and donate money, right? Because they've had such a great time with the students that they've seen, and they see them all the time working there. And so I think it's a great,
And are they doing a pretty good job fundraising?
They do a fantastic job fundraising.
They do.
And it helps that they have an executive director that's really involved. And B. Dixon, their director of development, is fantastic. So.
Yeah. What are some other organizations that seemingly do a pretty good job development-wise in town?
Well, Rice did a great job recently, right, with their $1 billion capital campaign. So that was fantastic. I mean, a lot hospitals do a really great job.
Texas Children's is sort of great.
MD Anderson, they have that big name.
Yeah.
People want to give to that.
And museums do pretty well.
Yeah, museums do well with
Arts.
I think they do big with major donors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any other Children at Risk we do well, but what other sort of medium or small organizations can you pick?
Small Steps.
Small
they do
Steps.
a fantastic job.
Yeah, they do a really
They do a really
job.
great job.
Small Steps is sort of a early education center.
Early education center only for lower income families. They've opened up several, and then they can show, which I think is what's different between donors now and say even 10 years ago. Everybody wants to know, what difference are you making with my money? Used to, people would just give you money and they didn't need to see the results, but now they really want to, and Small Steps can do that. And I think that's one of the big ones in town, smaller ones that does really well. Child Advocates isn't smaller, but it does really well. Interfaith Ministry does really well. Meals on Wheels.
There's a couple of good ones.
Yeah.
If I am getting my master's degree in nonprofit management, or I fresh out of college, and I'm thinking I want to do development. Do I have to have special training, or do I just need to be an enthusiastic personality? I mean, how do I get into development?
Oh, no, you don't have to have training. I think, especially smaller organizations, we're always looking for somebody that's interested in doing it, and has a background, a bachelor's degree, and they have a really big interest, and then maybe they've done some volunteer work at an organization. I think that really helps. And a lot of organizations will let you go and volunteer in their development department, so that would be a great step.
So doing internships.
Yeah, that would really help.
It seems like a lot of the entry-level jobs for nonprofits are in development, though.
Yeah, well, because we can, and they're also entry-level jobs, so they're probably some sort of development coordinator position where you're helping out in the office tasks and then move up the chain. And I know a lot of people that do that. And
talk to me about salaries in development from beginning to the top. I mean, what do they sort of look like?
They're low at the beginning, and that's just the nature of the beast.
What's low?
Like $30,000 is not unheard of in a smaller organization. And the salaries as you move up the chain depend on the size of the organization. So you could be director of development at a smaller organization and make $55,000. Or you could be the director of development and work at a large organization such as like neighborhood centers and make, $250,000, $300,000, or at Rice and make, over $500,000. So it just depends on on your level.
When is that Rice job going to be open?
I don't know.
That would
well,
be a good one
I also
to
don't have a
take.
PhD, so and Darrow does. So.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So it's all across the board, but there's lots of you can be ambitious and do pretty well.
You can do really well.
Yeah, very good.
And then I think a lot of directors of development, if they're really interested and they continue their education, they end up, because they work so closely with CFOs and the ED, I think a lot end up transitioning into that executive director role if they work in medium and small size.
What is your accomplishment that would be the one that you're probably most proud of in regards to development over your career, Linda?
I think right now I would say the biggest accomplishment would be, so I started off at the Kinder Institute, and they didn't have any internal development person, and so really completely ramping up their development program, kicking off a lunch that they had expected to make $50,000 and then making $150,000 and those types of things. So I was really proud of the work that we accomplished there and bringing in a lot of funds for that for the Kinder Institute.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
When you think about your future in development, do development people in general, and not just yours, but other development directors, do they want to be executive directors, or most development people love doing development and just want to go to the next big development job, do you think?
I think it's different for everybody. I mean, I think that's true in any position that you're in, that everybody's a little different. The problem with development and nonprofits, depending on the size, is especially if you're a director of development, like you've now come up to the highest that you're going to go. So if money starts to play an issue, then you almost have to move to make more money, because a lot of organizations, they're capped out. That's all they can really give you. So how far can you go with them? But also, some people, if they're really talented and they've been working to do a lot of budgeting and they've done a lot of working with the programming, I think that eventually they decide they want to move into an executive director position. They've got the experience in kind of looking at all the different moving pieces, and they know the fundraising side. So.
And you're a leader of a development department. You have a number of people that report to you. For you, Linda, what does it mean to be a leader? I mean, what does it mean? I mean, what are the strategies that you have to use to be a leader within development to get your staff going and to meet ambitious goals that people set for you?
I think every situation is different. In our particular situation, we have younger people that aren't experienced. So I think it's very important to kind of mentor them and watch more closely. I think if you're in an organization where you have really experienced people, then you have less of a dependence on really watching over every single step that they do. But we really do try to mentor them and watch over them a little bit more closely, and then giving them opportunities to do different things. So I think sometimes you bring somebody in and they're doing for grant writing, and you see that they have a skill in that, but also they might be interested in your special events or your individual giving, and trying to give them some experience in that so that you can maybe get them in to stay longer. Because it would be nice if they were, had some buy-in to the organization for a long time. Yeah.
Absolutely. We'll do our final couple of questions here, our final 5 minutes. First, I want to ask you, I mean, when you think of maybe the best director of development in town, is there someone that you point to?
I mentioned I like Bea Dixon. I think she does a really great job. I really love Kelly Zuniga, who's not a director of development anymore. Now she's the executive director at Holocaust Museum, but she was a director of development.
So there's an example of someone who moved, right?
But she comes from an academic background. She teaches still at Texas A&M in their fundraising class. But she has that practical experience as well. So you have the research behind what you're doing, but you also have the practical use. So I enjoy that.
And just sort of some fun questions. Your favorite restaurant in Houston?
I think currently my favorite nice restaurant in Houston is Underbelly. I love what Chris Shepard does there.
Yeah. What do you like there? What sort of dishes do you like?
I always try to get whatever their little special is.
Because it's different.
Something different every night.
It's always different,
yeah. But I've never gone.
They always have those Korean goat dumplings.
Yes,
right?
my husband likes those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like those.
Yeah. They're a little spicy.
They are a little spicy. yeah, that's right for you. Your favorite, best kept secret spot in Houston? Do you have a favorite?
I feel like now, maybe before, but I just had the kids, and I don't think I could do anything. My secret spot now. You just have
babies, right?
Yeah, so my secret spot now is like my living room, so we don't do anything.
Talk a little bit about that. I mean, you just had twins. How old are your twins right now?
7 months old.
7 months.
Yeah.
They're your first children. How do you manage that? I mean, you have this high pressure job, and you have these 2 babies. How does that work for you?
I'm very.
I'm glad it does, but I want to know, how does it work?
It's my husband. I couldn't do it if my husband wasn't there. But also, I think, and this is, he wouldn't not agree with this, is that I'm really the primary worker in our house. Like he's also.
He would agree with that?
He would.
Oh, he would.
And so he would say, and so he knows that. That's why I don't mind saying that. But yeah, so I'm really much more driven in my career and those types of things. So he doesn't mind being the person that if needs to be, he would say, I can't go to this meeting tonight because Linda has a meeting tonight all week. Every night this week, but that's okay. But he really is supportive. If I didn't have a really supportive husband, I couldn't do it.
You have had something every night this week.
I have had it, and that's okay.
Do you have something tomorrow? You do? No, I think it was canceled tomorrow.
It was canceled.
Final question, Linda.
John has something tomorrow night.
If they were going to make the Linda Bates movie, who would play you in the movies?
My initial response, I guess, would be Sarah Michelle Gellar. But not because I think I'm not beautiful. I just think that, I always loved Buffy.
You have a similarity to her, though.
I don't know. Maybe when I was younger, before the baby weight. I've always loved Buffy the Vampire Slayer on the TV show.
Yeah.
So.
Very good. Linda Bates is the Director of Development at Children at Risk. Thank you, Linda, so much.
Thank you.
For being here and talking with us a little bit. Next week, bring in another great guest, and we'll focus a little bit more on get some more specifics within development. And until then, keep up those reaction papers and keep the work going, and we'll see you next time.